All of you. You deserve what you get.
Don't be afraid. I want you to know that you're safe. My name is Dr. Hendrik Juliet Easterman, and I'm your friend. I'm now to guide your soul. It's going to be painful, but at the end of this journey, you'll be reborn. A whole new you.
Oh, where is that rat then?
These are all the belongings recovered from your person. This is a collection of your public records, along with the investigatory information about your private life. Well, you've got some secrets, don't you? Naughty. As the restraints make a signature impossible, please acknowledge that you consent to these collections. Thank you. Not bad looking, to be honest.
If you go for that type.
Well, I ain't never been that picky.
I just hate seeing their eyes.
What am I stopped back there? What? I'm not supposed to be here. Of course you deserve to be here. You made your choice. All of you. You deserve what you get.
Don't be afraid. I want you to know that you're safe. My name is Dr. Hendrik Juliet Easterman, and I'm your friend. I'm now
this lab rat then?
And can I?
It's all right here. These are all the belongings recovered from your person. This is a collection of your public records, along with the investigatory information about your private life. Oh, you've got some secrets, don't you? Naughty. As the restraints make a signature impossible, please acknowledge that you consent to these collections. Thank you. Not bad looking, to be honest.
If you go for that type.
Well, I ain't never been that picky.
I just hate seeing their eyes.
Please. Where am I stuck back there? What? I'm not supposed to be here. Of course you deserve to be here. You made your choice. All of you. You deserve what you get.
Don't be afraid. I want you.
A smile is the way that you welcome the day. Sing hey oh, come to the fair. The children are playing so merry and gay. Hey oh, come to the fair. All the teeth in your head are as clean as can be, shining and sharp and so pretty to see. So breathe in the happy gas, little ones all, and you fly away on a goose wing. And laugh till your reason just fritters away with a hey-ho, come to the fair. The geeses are honking the song that you know. Hey-ho, come to the fair. The wings are all beating away, let's go. Hey-ho, come to the fair. They'll be racing and chasing through endless night, and drilling and filling and fixing your bike. Soon you'll feel nothing, girls and boys in the chair where my daddy is working. So lock up your parents and leave them behind, and hey-ho, come to the fair. So pretty to see, so pretty.
Fish! Poor fishy, hungry cut his helper. this thing up my tuchus. I don't think we're alone. That's nothing compared to what you're gonna get. I'm just gonna find out all those sweet bits and rotten bits so they can put in something better.
Hello, dear children. I guess you're here today for... What is it? A squad fest, yes? Dr. Daddy, is that correct? I think they are, aren't they? I don't fucking know, Phyllis. Maybe they are. Welcome in, dear children. Are you ready for your therapy? You may read the points here and in the pinned message in the chat. Let's get started for this segment of a squad fest, yes. Who is Starry? Do you know who Starry is? I don't think we know who Starry is. I think it's time. This game called Marbles? I played this in my youth. Before I started my children's show. Get your marbles in, guys. Get your marbles in. These little fuckers better win something today or else I'm gonna shove them in the tuchus. How do you all get in for this again? Is it it's exclamation point play? Or there is special emotes on the interwebs that you can get in with.
Fish.
60 seconds, you lovely children. Get yourselves on in.
This thing up my tuchus. I don't think we're alone.
I hope you enjoyed our little dance that we had before. Me and Dr. Daddy here, we love to dance, don't we, Dr. Daddy? She makes me fucking dance and I fucking hate it. How has everyone's weekend been? I hear there's been some change in the time zones, yes? Is that correct? You want the bird to fight you? This is my father, I'll have you know. Don't come for us like that. Excuse me? You cannot speak to my father like that, CJ. Yes, that is correct. 2 a.m. That is correct, folks, yes. So for anyone who has not read the pinned message at the top, it is top 50 getting layers. What the fuck's a layer? I'll fucking lay these bitches in a minute. My MILF game is on top. Well, thank you so much. They say I am the best entertainer in the land, you know, yes? It's 4 a.m. That's lovely. Thank you for being here at 4 a.m. It's 2 a.m. Oh, look, it's 2 a.m. for somebody. It's 2 a.m. for everybody, yes? Yes? Oh, we're going through the time zones. Well, I mean, you're stuck in a time loop where you were before, yes? How has everyone's time zones been? I don't give a shit about time zones. You'll fucking listen to me. Also, children, don't forget we have some special, as you can see on the screen, emotes for you all to use today. And those little sound things. You can hear some of our lovely, lovely past voices from the show. Yes, congratulations on your marble season, everybody. But if you don't know who I am Mother Gooseberry, and this is Dr. Futterman. And it's lovely to meet you all, everybody. Here is a very nice description by Joey and the Frog, is it? Or is it Fog? I don't think I can read correctly. Dr. Daddy, do you know what that name says? I think he's a fucking froggy bastard ribbiting about the fucking place. Sorry, you were telling me to fuck off? Me? Me? Oh, we have a world record. What is a world record, everybody? Is that when you win things? We're looking to win things today, yes? Joey eating frogs. Yes, he loves the frogs. I love the frogs. Maybe he eats them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They taste like chicken. Well, guess what? I'm a fucking duck. This is a fucking duck, and I'm a fucking duck. Quack, quack, bitches. Chicken roux. Oh, chicken. You said you like chicken. There's a chicken in the wind there. That's a chicken. That's a fucking chicken there. So, who all has seen my show before? You all seen the show? You love my show, children, don't you? Oh, there's one of those world record things, like I said before. And let's take a look at that leaderboard. I heard there's been some issues this weekend with leaderboards for people, but we are very smart here in the land, and Chicken Roux is at the top of the leaderboard at the moment. Points going down through 100th place. We're moving on to the next map. What do you mean a chicken is faster than a duck? Honk, honk! Get your marbles in there, guys! Has anyone seen my work before? Anybody?
Yes.
Fresh fish? Yes, we do like fresh fish here. That is correct.
Bring up my tuckers. I don't think we're alone.
Get your marbles in here, folks. Yes. And don't forget to check out those lovely commands today. You're new here? Well, welcome in. Welcome to my show. I hope you're all ready for your therapy, because it is very intense.
Cocaine habit, mighty sweet. Goose you out of bed, get you on your feet. Hey, little
Baby, come and take a whiff from me.
wiggle on.
Do you like my song? It's lovely, isn't it? 60 seconds on the clock, guys. Get yourselves in.
Hey,
Honey, take a whiff from me. Do you all like to whiff people? I love whiffing people. Yes.
motherfucking
Some of them smell like bad things, though. Dr. Daddy wouldn't let me do that.
honey, take a whiff.
I think they do eat haggis. That is correct, Az. Yes, they do, yes.
Tell you behave, say you got to do right. Cocaine'll get you.
Thank you for saying I have a beautiful singing voice. You know, working here in the industry, it helps with my lovely, lovely vocal cords. That will be out in album very soon, folks. You can buy it in the store, on the Marbles on Stream store. That is going to be your biggest hit there, yes. All right, everyone, good luck. Let's grab a bowl. You know what, Phyllis? I fucking love balls. I just love them in my fucking mouth. Nom, 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 nom. Why, thank you, Gem Lane. That is very kind of you. Thank you. I have this lovely... Would you like to see a full view of my outfit? Let me show you just now. You won't hear me. Hang on one moment, please. I can show you my dance again if you'd like. Yes? Aren't I the best dancer you've ever seen? You love a whiff of mystery. That's great. You love to whiff the shit. Yes. Wonderful. I have the best moves, yes. So, do you all know why you're here today? As I said, it is therapy. Your therapy is on the horizon. You will face some very, very, very hard trials. There is also a scary man. I don't know if you heard about the scary man in the trials. He's a little bit scarier than I am. Have you heard of him? Hello, Kelly Tonto, welcome in. Yes, there's a scary man. He likes to fry his bowls as well. Funny that we're talking about bowls today. He has a lovely stick that he shoves on his balls. Now, I would never do such a thing. He does, though. So you should watch out for that scary stick, guys, or else you never know what's going to happen. Urban legend, there is no such thing as what? Sorry, CJ. Sorry, what? You got 2 skins yesterday. Congratulations. You had a feel. Sorry, who's Starry? I don't know who Starry is. Could you explain to me? I don't know who she is. Last time I stuck a stick into my balls. My wife. Oh, well, you know what? If your children are ready for the therapy, I'm more than happy to welcome them in there, Ron. Also, I think Dr. Daddy has a few words. Yes, there's Dr. Daddy talking about his fresh fish just now again. There is no one of those world records this time. 8675 Cat is going to take that win, though. Let's take a look at your points there, children. We're going to check our leaderboard. Sitting at the top at the moment, we have 867 Cat. We have Keith and that froggy guy in third. Let's go on to the next one. Let's go, Haley. Let's go. Very nice. This is Dr. Daddy, yes? I know I heard from someone that you don't like that word, but I hope the way that I'm saying it is lovely. Oh, look, it's me singing again. Lovely. Very lovely. Has anyone not been lucky this weekend? I see many people have won those things called layers. Has anyone not had the luck? The luck of the Scottish? Is it the luck of the Irish? I'm not sure. 60 seconds to get your balls in there, guys. You need 2 more layers. You need your last layer. Well, don't forget, folks, you will be refreshing very, very shortly because there are new drops coming into the land. Don't mention the layers. Wake up the moaners. Well, I could wake them up if you want. You fucking bastards, you don't complain about the fucking layers, people's microphones, people's streams lagging. You know what? You can fuck right off. See, Dr. Daddy does have the wise words, you know. It happens in this land called Twitch. Yes? Yes? It is not. This is Dr. Futterman. Dr. Futterman, hello. Say hello, hello. Hi! Let's grab a ball. You haven't won a layer. Well, hopefully we can give you one. Get him told, Dr. Daddy. Yes, Dr. Daddy does have those wise words. Oh, Malaga, hello, welcome in. Welcome in, Raiders. How are we all doing? Happy time zone, happy 2 a.m. Happy Squad Fest. Welcome in, folks. Hello. This is me. My name is Phyllis, if you've never met me before. Better known as Mother Gooseberry on your TV screens. And this is Dr. Futterman. Hi, y'all. What you doing? You fucking fannies. But yes, welcome in, Raiders. How are we all doing? I hope you had a lovely time with your balls as well, yes? Tell us all about your balls. You want me to give Dr. Futterman a treat? I don't think so. Maybe some of that fresh fish, yes?
Mama Flame.
Oh, Mama Flame, thank you ever so much for the 200 bits. Bits? What do bits do?
Uni 100, Uni 100, give drive. Futterman a treat.
Poor fishy. I wish I could.
All the shenanigans. We love the shenanigans, don't we?
I don't think we're alone.
But I thank you ever so much for being here today. As I said, this is your first time seeing me. That froggy guy might have some information about it that can explain better than me at this very moment in time. But I am everyone's known and loved children's show host, yes.
Little brat.
Are you being brats there, children? Do I need to tell Dr. Daddy? Dr. Daddy, do you know what these children are doing? I feel that they're not behaving themselves, are they? There is no My Stats here today. The season is deactivated until Tuesday. This is my daddy. This is my daddy. This is Dr. Futterman. He's my dad, you know, yeah? Did you not know that? Yes, he likes to join us here. Are we honking? What are you honking for? You love this. Well, thank you ever so much for the very, very kind words. I see you're going to do very, very well in the therapy there, Mystery. Centre cut bacon? So we've went from chickens to bacon? Very interesting there, children. Unfortunately, I will have to end my therapy short due to contractual obligations with the Office of Post. Not a problem at all, Ron Miser. You go and help people in getting their mail. Don't forget my package now. I am waiting on a package in the mail, thank you. Yes, have a fantastic day there. Once again, that is centre cut bacon. Christmas freak? Excuse me, I think Christmas is not for another few months. Why are we bringing this into the season of October? I have no idea. You'll give me a pack. Oh, well, thank you ever so much. Centre cut bacon is going to take that way there. Let's have a look. Let's see. 8675 Cat is still at the top of the leaderboard at the moment, folks. Let's get on to your next race of balls. Balls! Balls! Exclamation point play, everyone. Children, get yourselves in. This is going to be part of the extreme therapy coming up very, very shortly for you all. Phyllis! You haven't told them what's fucking happening today. Nobody understands. Well, if you didn't know, we're here for Squad Fest. 50 layers will be giving out to 50 of the lucky ones to make it out of therapy. I can't guarantee you're all going to make it out alive. Did I say that word? I don't think that was the good word to say, actually. You're going to fucking hit them in the fucking biscuit! 60 seconds, children. Get yourselves on in. Dr. Daddy, can I have a word with you for a second, please? One moment there, children. Get your balls on in. Thank you. Dr. Daddy was just telling me something secret. You can't know about it yet. It's something to do with your therapy. 15 seconds there, children. Get yourselves in. Oh no, Ron, not that. We'll add that to the list of the complaints that were probably had this weekend, yes? Let me grab a ball again, shall we? You need a lot of therapy. That's very nice. We can try and help you there, Haley Page. Yes, exactly there, Froggy. I hope you don't mind me calling you Froggy. Or is it Foggy? Is it foggy where you are? Frogs turn you on? I think you mean it might need some more therapy for that. Extreme therapy at that, you know? Doctor's gonna give Ron that big drill. Well, let me ask if he can help Ron in that department. Can you help in that department there? Ron! 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 I'm gonna follow you on your vacation, you little fanny. You need an adult? Well, I'm sorry. I am the only adult here at the moment, children. I am the only one that can help you at this moment in time. It's the Uka therapy, yes it is. Hello, rascal, in the other side of the world. Are you here and ready for your therapy as well, ma'am? There's none in... Yeah, exactly, there is none in here apart from myself and obviously Dr. Daddy, yeah? Oh, we're singing some songs again. That I am. Let's go. Well, it is going to be some extreme therapy today for anyone who did not hear. There will only be 50 people making it through the therapy alive. Oh, look, it's one of those world record things again. Laughingest. At least it's not a name of an animal this time, taking the win. Fresh fish! See, you like your fish there, children. What would you like your fish with? Good morning, Elman. Welcome in. Oh, somebody got a time out. Well, well, naughty children have to sit in the corner. That's what happens.
Get you so high, knock you on your ass.
What is going to happen to the other people who are not on the 50? I'm sorry to say, Benty, but you will not be seen alive after today. I'm really, really sorry.
Hey, honey, take a whiff.
Oh, we're whiffing again. Everyone loves a good whiff. Make sure to use those nostrils. And get a good whiff. Get a good whiff of everything, yes.
Hey, hey, baby, take a whiff on me.
What were you whiffing this time? Dr. Daddy can follow me anywhere. Ooh, very nice, very nice. Chippadoodle. Now at the top of the leaderboard. Let's go. Let's move on to the next one, children. All right, children. Your next level of therapy is here. Get those balls in. Balls, balls, balls. And also to let you know, folks, if you happen to make it out of your therapy today, up after here you will be going to a place called the Marble Legend. Yes, we will be heading there in about an hour and a half's time. But only 50 of you will be making it out, don't forget. Yes, only 50 people. The other ones will be left. Who is in the cleanup team today here in the trials? Who is the cleanups? Who's on cleaning? Oh, I heard people like cleanups actually, but it doesn't always happen in this land here on Twitch, does it? 60 seconds, everybody. Get your balls in. Honk, honk!
Fresh fish, fresh fish. Poor fishy. I wish I could help, but from the size of this thing up my tuchus, I don't think we're alone.
You're very shocked by this accent. Well, the accent may change throughout the day. I have been, known to change the accent from time to time. That's what happens when you're on the TV all the time, yes? 20 seconds there, children. Get yourselves in. I need to make sure that I got a month. Oh, you want to do some more whiffing there, Mama Flame? Let's do it. We like a good whiff here. Thank you, Jamie. Very, very, very kind of you. Oh, no. One moment, please. Oh. see. I've heard about this streaking thing that people have been doing. But I think in your therapy you may need to put your clothes on because it is very, very, very intense, yes? I don't want anyone getting injuries, you know? Or maybe I do. Rascal, thank you ever so much for those 5 gifted a sub. For more whiffing for everyone. For a month. More whiffers? Oh, you're freeing the nips. Fantastic. We love a good whiff, eh? Or a nip. Or a whiff nip. Yes. Oh, are we all freeing our nips now? Well, you may lose one of your nips today, guys. A niff whip? What's a niff whip? What's a niff whip? Thank you, Mama Qatar. Qatar? Is it Qatar? Thank you for this hype train. Are you all feeling hype? You might not be feeling so hype at the end of this segment. As I said, not everyone will be making it out here alive. Marie with the win. What a lovely name, Marie. Very nice, very nice.
Huh? Huh?
Oh, are we confused there, Joey and the Froggies? Are we confused?
Joey in the fog says 1 bits.
Oh, you're saying huh.
Cheer 100.
Are you looking for an explanation of something? Do you need a hand with something there? But yes, jump aboard the whiff train. Would we like, you know what we should do during this next race? We're going to do dance again because I love to dance.
Cheer 100, cheer 100.
I don't know, am I alive? Who knows, that's for everyone to find out. Marie with the win on this trial here. Keith now strong in the lead.
Huh? Huh?
It seems that a lot of people here are confused. 60 seconds, children. Get your balls in here. Get your balls in.
Slybabe says 1 bit.
Cheer 100.
Oh, we are. What is it? What is this here? We're on level 3 of a hype train. Very nice, thank you. Ever so kindly, children. But it's not going to help you through your trials today. It's all about your stamina, your energy, maybe? Oh, no, wait. That's not till Tuesday. But
Rorikai says
you cannot pay yourselves to survive through the trials today. 60 seconds on the clock. Get your balls in. I don't see a starry here. 10 meows? 10 meows? There is no starry here. Starry is taking a break from this channel today, and I have overtaken
To Jurassic
What is that racket I can hear? 30 seconds, children. Get yourselves in. Starry got eaten. Does it look like I eat people? Do I look like I eat people? No, but I'm gonna fucking eat these bitches up before the end of the day is out. Dr. Daddy, you can't say things like that. Did you hear what Dr. Daddy said there? Sound commands for you all to use today. Thank you. Also, at this moment in time, I'd like to thank the lovely Joshua over at Sportscast Squad for inviting me, Phyllis, to this event today. And I think Dr. Daddy has a word. Don't you? Yes. Hang on one moment, please. Yeah, maybe don't use those words though, Dr. Daddy. Maybe something a little bit nicer. That fucking sports car squad. You know what I fucking heard? Cowboys this, cowboys that. I don't like horror. Next season on American Horror Story. Yes, yes. I don't know who these cowboys are. I've never heard of them before. But I do know a very, very pretty lady yesterday in a lovely, lovely outfit was sporting some lovely clothes for the cowboys as well. It kind of sounds like Josh, GT. Yes, yes, yes. Did you all see that lovely lady there for the cowboys yesterday? Yeah? The cowboys need therapy after all the lose. Yeah. I've heard they've been losing a fair bit, haven't they? Oh, the cowgirls are going to lose. Oh. Well, not if they have Haley Page on the team. I'm just saying, I don't think so. Oh my goodness. Now, a little birdie told me that CJ is renowned for not winning in this part of Twitch. And today, he shows up and does take a win. CJ, do you have any words for that? Are you ready for your therapy? Is that what it is? Were you waiting for your therapy to show off your skills on this track in the trials? Thank you everyone for that level 3 35% hype train. You have no comment. Well, that's just wonderful, isn't it? And thank you all so much for following our show today. Don't forget, if you happen to make it out alive, you can catch us during the week as well. Let's take a look at your leaderboard there. Keith, still in the lead at the moment. You're ready for your therapy, but do you still need to show your skills? Well, you better get yourself into some action there, Benty. Get your balls in. CJ winning, does that mean therapy is working? It could be working, it could be CJ's day today, yes? It's nice to show that he's making an effort today, you know? For a change. Should we dance? Are we ready to dance, everyone? We're going to dance during this next one. I said that before. Let's do it. 60 seconds. Get your balls on in. You need more therapy then. Sign me up for extra sessions. I've got you. Yes, yes. Well, that's only if you make it through today. Thank you very much, Mahida. I appreciate the very, very kind words. And I'm sure Dr. Daddy does as well. Yeah, I guess so. This bitch has her fucking hand up my fucking tuchus this whole fucking day. I don't know what I'm gonna fucking do after this. I need a shower and bleach. You love Dr. Daddy. Yes, me too. He's a lovely father, isn't he? You need that bird. But what kind of bird is he? People were calling him a chicken before. Well, he is a quack quack. Shall we dance, everyone? Let's go. I wanna dance. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. And we dancing in the do. Hey, oh, come to the fair. There'll be dancing. Hey, oh, come to the fair. We might be going to the fair after this, folks, if you make it out through the therapy. Oh, darling, we will instruct the Puppet Patrol services to rescue quick sticks. Where are the sticks going there, Jamie? And thank you there, Froggy. Once again, a little description about myself today. If you did not know anything about me, there you go. Oh, we're honking, are we? You bunch of honkers, are we? Oh, and we're on the fish. You seem to like this fish very much, folks, don't you? Children?
The size of this thing up my tuchus. I don't think we're alone.
Oh, no. Oh, you missed out on that world record. Hello, welcome in, child. Welcome in, welcome in. Seems that our music station is broken, so bear with me a moment there, folks. We're going to restart that jukebox just now. Yes, I will, of course, save the last dance for you there, Mama Flame. Oh, right, white tiger. Another animal. I told you there's many animals here today. Oh, look, Keith is still in the lead. And for anyone who did not hear before, that the accent may change from time to time from where I am from. Are you ready to get your marbles in, folks? Get your balls in. I think we fixed the jukebox. Is a jukebox? Let's see if it plays the next song, shall we? I'm playing some of my favourite music on the jukebox today. And you have 60 seconds there, children. Get yourselves in for your 8th round of therapy. 8th round already. With just over an hour left to prove yourselves and if you can make it out alive. Well, children, I just heard that this number means something to people. This map has been played 69 times. Now, I don't know what it is. I like a good fucking 69, you know it, bitches! Yeah! Wow! What words that was there from Dr. Daddy. Why, Crystal, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Wow. You never know what Daddy's going to say next, folks. I don't think Daddy knows how to be nice. No, I don't think he does. Kenny? Where's Kenny going? Oh no. That's not going to take you through. Oh, we're whiffing again, are we?
Pulls you out of bed, get you on your feet. Hey, little baby.
Come and take a whiff on me.
Wiggle on down to the gooseberry patch. Get you so high, knock you on your ass. Hey, hey.
Come and take a whiff on me. Hello, Poker. Welcome in. Hello, hello.
Is a motherfucking liar and a peck of wood. Hey, hey.
Come and take a whiff on me. As I said, folks, we've been whiffing a lot today. A lot of whiffing.
Fucking and fighting. Hey, hey, hey.
Oh, look at this. Sly Babe. Taking the win. This another one of those world record things. Let's go. Bear with me one moment there, children. Yes, Dr. Daddy was speaking about that 69 thing there with the world record. But now it makes it 70. 70. Fresh fish again, folks. Let's take a look and see. Oh, Keith, still. Hold on. Keith is doing the best. You're the best child there, Keith. Keep it up and you will be making it out alive. Good job there, Keith. All right, children, you all know what to do. If you don't, well, maybe someone else can help you. Yes, it seems the jukebox has fixed. I was just checking our jukebox there. Keith about to get a 1v1 with Dr. Daddy. I think so, CJ. We'll see what happens at the end, won't we? Yeah. All right, children, 60 seconds. 60 seconds to get those balls in. And I'd like to remind you all. Actually, Dr. Daddy would probably like to tell you instead. If there's any fucking lag, refresh your fucking browsers, ain't your fucking fault. Alright. Well, that's one way to put it, isn't it, Dr. Daddy? Yeah? I don't want you missing any races, that's it. To make it through your therapy today. You like that, Doctor? Thank you, Mama. Thank you. Just get that good McDonald's Wi-Fi. What is it, McDonald's? I've never heard of it before. Oh my days, Dr. Daddy. Putlam, hello, hello. Dr. Daddy always has a way with... This is very true, he does. He does have his way with words. 60 seconds there, children. Get yourselves in. Yes, no, Madge. Dr. Daddy has his way with words. More than I do. How you refresh with Alt F4. That is the best way to refresh in here. I don't know who this starry you're talking about, because I don't see a starry here. Do you guys? I do not. I do not. Yes, of course. The Alt F4 is your best way there. Rogerius, hello, welcome in. How are you doing, my child? Let's grab a ball.
Fresh fish, Poor fishy. I wish I could help, but from the size of this thing up my tuchus, I don't think we're alone.
I think you've told us that many times before, Dr. Daddy, yes? Make sure to delete system 32. Why not 31 and why not 33?
Shut up, you clumsy bitch!
Wow! You think I'm clumsy? Me? I'm never clumsy. I would never ever be so clumsy. I'm the smartest person you know. Because 32 has the good? What's good? What is this good you talk about? Yes, exactly. That's why I'm asking. What is good? Do you know what good is? Because I don't know good. McDonald's Wi-Fi is good. If you delete system 32, and it makes it faster. Wow. There you go, folks. You can follow the instructions of Trev in chat. Ghost Circuit. Oh, we do like some ghosts here, don't we? Ghost Circuit taking the win. Not one of those world record things, though. Oh, look, the frog's stuck in the back, folks. Froggy, what are you doing? Frogs are chilling. Okay, I deleted system 32 and things no worky. Can someone please help Nasty Nate, please? Ghost Circuit is taking that win. Let's take a look. Keith is really desperate to make it out alive. Still holding on to the top. It worked before. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Yes, the flame. Thank you very much. Yes, that is correct. Children, I can see that you know what to do now to get through the therapy today. And if you didn't, is exclamation point play? Or one of those little picture things, an emote? Yes, use one of those. Get your balls in. Balls. And there's 60 seconds to get in for this round of therapy. You need more therapy? Well, guess what? You are in luck, Benty. You still have about an hour left of therapy. So, lucky you. Thank you, Mr. Frog, for pinning that message. If you're looking to see where you are going to be lucky and making out alive during the therapy, will be 50 people. Only the top 50. So, if you have not had any caffeine and not put on your running shoes, get them on just now. Oh, fantastic, Horace. Fantastic. Let's grab a bowl. I don't know what happened to the first one. Well, I can guess maybe something to do with extreme therapy today. Don't forget, this is the extremest of therapies you're going to go through on your Sunday. I can't talk for the rest of the day, though. Mother Gooseberry, I have problems with Joey and the Froggy. Can you help me? Well, maybe he's going to be lucky enough not to make it. Then I can help you there. But if he ends up in the top 50, he's going to make it through another day. Not like that, I know. I've heard that Jelly Dub and Joey are like this all the time. Dr. Daddy, can you please have a talk with Jelly Dub for me, please? Let me ask. Dr. Daddy, could you please have some words with Jelly Dub? What's that? Mm-hmm. 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 Mm. Right. 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 Jelly fucking Dub, why is your name Jelly? Do you look like jelly? Because I'm gonna fucking turn you into a ball of jelly after today. Wow, that is what I'm guessing is gonna happen to Jelly Dub if they don't make it out of the trials today.
I think Mother needs to give somebody a time out!
Somebody receiving another time out? Children, you must behave during your trials, or else you're not going to make it out. Bad axe with the win. GG's. All right, let's have a look. Bad axe. Look at that lovely marble. It looks like you could use some more layers. Let's see if you're going to be lucky enough to get one by the end of the therapy. And take a look at our leaderboard, as we always like to show you. Oh, Keith, what's going to happen? Smoke a lot. Do you smoke a lot? Is now in the lead. All right, children, get in for your next therapy. You do smoke a lot. I heard that's very bad for you. Is the jukebox still working? It looks to be. Let me go and double check it. I'm going to start your countdown. 60 seconds, children. Get your balls in. All right, children, I can confirm the jukebox looks to be working. That's good, that's good. Let's grab a ball.
Rabbit, mighty sweet, goose you out of bed, get you on your feet. Hey, little baby,
come and take a whiff on me. We like a lot of whiffing, yes we do. Dr. Daddy does too, won't you? 'Cause hey, baby, take a whiff on me.
Take a whiff on me.
It's always good to know the jukebox is working. Exactly, Froggy. Yes, yes. We can't have it in silence, you know? No.
They tell you behave.
This is fine. Exactly, this is fine. And also, just a reminder, folks, if this is not for you, you can always close that big thing at the corner of your screen and press X. Jinx, hello, my dear child. Welcome in. How are you? Pandora coming in and gifting 5 subscriptions for whiffing for a month. Let's go, Pandora. Jinx, thank you ever so much for bringing in the rest of the children. Are they ready for the therapy? Yes, welcome in, Raiders. Welcome in, children. We're here doing some extreme therapy for Squadfest. Pandora, thank you for giving out those 5 subscriptions of good whiffing. Pandora, how are you? Blondie, hello Blondie, good morning, welcome in. How are you? This is Dr. Daddy, by the way, if you've not met Dr. Daddy before. We are on a lovely show. It's my Mother Gooseberry show. Play in the chat. Well, that is very, very knowledgeable to know. Play in the chat. Don't. Oh, Keith, you stepped up the game again, Keith. We're going to level of.
Oh, nasty little
there, children. Now you can put play in chat. Be honking again, children? Ow. All right, children, 60 seconds for your next level here on therapy. Dr. Daddy, did Dr. Daddy turn your mic volume down? Maybe, possibly. Oh my God, not that. Here we fucking go again. Moan, 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 moan. All these people do all weekend is fucking moan about something. There's lag. There is mic problems. You name it. They're all fucking moaning. Shut the fuck up. I know Dr. Daddy is very rude. How dare he do that? Your balls are dirty. Well, guess what? I'm sure some people would like to whiff them. Oh, we spoke about you cleaning before. And once again, oh, look, we are following the imposter. I've heard about the imposter, if you know, you know. Dr. Daddy calling, yes, exactly. Dr. Daddy is one for calling people out. But cleaning, I cannot guarantee. Yes, you are very late for getting cleaned. There may be some whiffing though. There is plenty of whiffing and honking and fishies and animals. You don't care that you missed it. Well, Blondie and everyone else just coming in just now, I hope you are ready. We are still working through our extreme therapy here today. Only 50 people will be making it out alive.
Fish, poor fishy.
Please see the front desk. Who's working the front desk today here?
I don't think we're alone.
Yes, cleaning happened before. Exactly. Yes. You're going to be on the front desk. Well, that's fabulous, folks. If any queries, you can go and see the Flame 619. Please do not make any complaints, because I'm sure Dr. Daddy will have something to say about that. I will sing as much as I want to sing there, Mr. Froggy. Oh, Blondie, would you like to dance with me? I can dance with you shortly if you'd like to see. Yes, Mr. Froggy, yes. Anyone who has not seen my dance, I will make sure to get a few more dances in with you all. You do what you want. Well, you won't be doing what you want if you don't make it into the top 50, will you? No, you won't. Oh, look at that. The bits goal has been completed. Blondie, thank you ever so much for 400 of your bits. Can I whiff your bits, please? Did I say that out loud? Oh, no. I think Dr. Daddy's rubbing off on me here. And not in the good way. Jay with the win on this level of the trials. Let's see, Keith is going back in strong. Next level number 13. All right, children, get yourselves in. Oh, thank you there, Mr. Froggy, for that lovely quote. Oh, you want some more fish? We have fresh fish. I heard there's fishies here sometimes in other days, but that fish of that kind is not here today. 60 seconds, children. Level 13 of therapy. Chandro, welcome in. Hello. 25 seconds, children. Get yourselves in. I think most of you are awake now. Fish day is the best. The other days, the cafeteria has steamed spam and Brussels sprouts. Not that. All right, is everyone ready for the dance again, shall we? Are you ready, everyone? If you've not seen the dance, we have done it many times so far. Let's go, shall we? Come on down to the Gooseberry Park and we will all dance. Dr. Daddy dances with me. That's what we do. Was it lovely? Must be off for now. No problem at all. Blondie, thank you for coming in for your therapy. I guess you will be making it out alive. We might see you around somewhere later. Yes, happy reset, everyone. Your energy is cleaned. It's a very lovely dance, thank you. Yes, and thank you, Mr. Froggy. Refresh your tabs for your new drops have started. Thank you, everyone, for letting everyone know. Get refreshed, get those layers, because not everyone's going to get them here. Yes, no, it's extreme therapy, Nomad. Extreme. Rebirth is if only you make it into the 50, that you will have a chance of rebirth. Kitty Cat, good morning, Kitty Cat. Welcome in, my child. How are you doing? You've got a Twitch baby. Well, that baby can get ready for his therapy then. King Cozy, very, very good job. Oh, you're having a date, are you? Very nice, very nice. Very cute. Very demure, is that the word? Demure. It's a baby therapy. Yes, all the scuffs are going to happen today, yes. Gem, are you sure about that, Gem? I can't believe the last part of your message. King Cozy. Lovely job, King Cozy, looking to try and push up on there. Keith, though, Keith, you'd like Dr. Daddy to scuff you. Let me ask him. Let's get set up for the next level of therapy first. It's a secret, okay. One moment, children. Sorry, the jukebox was acting up again. You see Robin? Yes, I also see Robin. Hello, Robin. 60 seconds again. Children, get yourselves on in. Oh, look. Folks, can you see? That is the marble legend in the chat. As I said, if you make it through, there are 50 people who make it through this therapy, you will be going to see the marble legend. And for those of you who don't, well, you will be stuck. And who knows what's going to happen to you. I don't see a starry in here, sorry. There's no starry here today. I'm Phyllis, also known as Mother Gooseberry. Fresh fish again? How much fish do you guys need? I hope someone's keeping up with the supplies.
I don't think we're alone.
As long as you're with Joey, you're okay. Well, perfect. I'm sure that can be arranged. Maybe we can stitch you together. Oh, wouldn't that be lovely?
Oh, nasty little brat!
Cheers to you, Horace. Cheers to you. Enjoy your whiskey. Oh, you look at... Okay, so are we all going to go together? People that did not make it, so you have Joey and Jem. You've got Benty and Robin. Anyone else want to be paired together? Or stitched together? Or you want to be stitched by back, yes? Back to back? That can be arranged. A good tag team. Look at this, guys. You've made it to level 14 of your therapy. No well, I'm sorry to say, if you don't make it out in the top 50, stitches may be happening. Or maybe you're put into the incinerator at the sex factory. You don't want any more Frankenstitches. I've heard about your Frankenstitches. Yes. But I'd say definitely the worst is to go into that incinerator, guys. Incinerator. Yes, you heard me correct, the sex factory. I like to make mandals there. I have the best mandals. And for anyone who did not understand, that is man-dolls, D-O-L-L-S. Man-dolls. You will find them in my sex factory. Couplon, taking one of those world record things. And the win. Correct, Blondie, yes. Do they speak? Yes. They tell me the dirtiest of things. They really do. Correct, Blondie, yes. I mean, if some of you prefer to go to the fun fair, we could go there. Or some of you might end up in the orphanage. You used to work there, CJ. Yes, you left us a long time ago. You made it out just in time. Correct, Mama Flame, yes. Oh, that's your hotspot, the Flame, yeah? You want to go to the fun fair. Which ride would you like to go on? Or will we make you the ride, Joey? Couplon with one of those world record things. Gaia Ellie, welcome in. My child, how are you doing? Oh, look at this change of events. Chrissy, overtaking Keith in therapy. Oh, we're all going to be riding Joey apparently after today. Very nice. Ooh, ooh. Get your balls in, children. You all want to ride Joey? Consent is key. Consent is key there, okay? You must ask Joey if it's okay to ride him. And what the perfect song to come on the jukebox. This is the song that you can listen to whilst you ride Joey. 60 seconds. You want to ask Joey for tickets? Joey, how much are the tickets to ride you? You know that fucking Joey? I'm gonna shove this drill right up his fucking ass on that ride. Talk to Daddy, you can't do that. Simply not. Wow.
Fresh fish, poor fishy.
Does the Joey ride Croak and Ribbit during this ride? Yes. Depends how hard you ride Joey.
You dumb cow.
I think Joe is inquiring about the bondage Undertaker sex doll from... Yes, that is correct. We've got a sex doll called Damien Priest. Damien Priest, anyone? Anyone at all? Damien Priest is in our incinerator room right now. Oh, is that a Lefferette? Well, we have some special treatment just for Lefferette. I've heard they like shape-shifting babies. Have you heard about the shape-shifting babies, guys? Ooh, Joey says, if you ride me good enough, I will croak for sure. Well, that's an offer you can't refuse there, guys. There is no ooh here, but we do have some special commands for today and redeems. Redeems. You can find my whiffing song there. It's definitely not an offer that you can refuse. No, you cannot refuse it.
Little dumb. Cocaine habit, mighty sweet.
Oh, let's whiff again, guys. Let's go.
On your feet, hey little baby.
Come and take a whiff on me.
Wish I could help, but
Wiggle on down to the gooseberry patch. Get you so high, knock you on your ass. Hey, hey.
Come and take a whiff on me. Whiffy, whiffy.
Anybody says cocaine ain't good is a motherfucking nut.
Which offer are you refusing, Benty?
Hey, hey.
Did you just call me a clumsy bitch? Wow. No, that was Dr. Daddy, actually.
They tell you behave, say you got to do right. Cocaine'll get you out there fucking and fighting. Say, hey, hey, baby, take a whiff on me.
Oh, guys, this song just gets me going. Shall we dance again? We can dance again and I will refuse every offer. Wow, Benty, you wanted it all before and not anymore. Horace, I do not understand which language you're speaking in the chat. I wish I didn't miss the reference for this therapy today. Did you all know that therapy was going to happen to you today? MVS Morgan taking the win. Yes, Horace, I do not understand the language that you are speaking in this channel at the moment. I woke up right before the therapy and you were not ready. Well, I'm ready now. Are you calling me stupid, Horace? Morgan taking the win. Let's take a look at this leaderboard. Minnesota, very nice. In the lead at the moment. Not winning quite yet to make it through the therapy. Last level before you all get to fight some things out. Get those balls in. Not me, oh, Dr. Daddy. Okay. I was going to say, what did I do? All I have done is sang and danced for you today. I've had nothing but kind words for you all. 60 seconds, children. Get yourselves in for your last level of therapy. Then we're going to battle some things out. Oh, you cannot call Dr. Daddy stupid, says Gem Lane. Maybe Dr. Daddy needs therapy too, CJ. I don't think so. I don't think so. Now, I myself had my therapy many, many years ago. And, well, you can see, I made it in some sort of one piece, shall we say. Oh, this song on the jukebox just now. Dental hygiene, don't forget you will also need your dental hygiene for your therapy. And here's more instructions on how to do so. Brush your teeth. Brush your teeth. Who are the Spice Girls? I've never heard of them before. Oh, this was them when they auditioned? Oh, interesting. Also, this is one of the songs you may hear if you end up at the fun park, folks. Oh, look, it's a big dick! Taking the win, Dick! Well done! I like a big dick in me right now. Dr. Daddy, really? And taking one of those world record things, yes. Oh, you're hungover. Too many of those vino things, Cyberdial. Well, I hope you're ready for therapy, because that's what we're here doing today, Cyberdial. Dick, I do apologise for Dr. Daddy's words, but you never know what he's going to say. Dick with the win. Let's go over to take a look at who at the moment is looking to take their way through the therapy today. And then we're going to battle some things out. At the moment, folks, Minnesota, Chrissy and Keith all sitting in the top 3. We are going to battle it out now, folks. Yes, quote 100, but not here. Not here, guys. No, not here. Get those balls in. Balls, balls, balls. I have an idea, folks. I have an idea. Do you want to know what the idea is? The idea is, can Minnesota hold on to first place? Because guess what, guys? You're all going to target them during this battle. Minnesota, this is where you need to show your strength in the trials and hold on to where you are. 60 seconds, children, get yourselves in.
Poor fish.
Hello, Captain Zero. Hello, welcome in. Hello.
The tuchus.
I don't see any Starry here today, sorry. Oh, look, guys, it's that Captain Penis! I love a penis, me. See, I told you, folks. You never know what Dr. Daddy's going to say next. He hears things around the interwebs. And as I said, he takes this information and can use it back on you, folks. So we've had dicks and we've had penises. Wow. Wow. You like Daddy's thinking? Well, thank you, Jem. Thank you. Maybe you will be one of the lucky ones to make it out of therapy today. Alright, guys. Target Minnesota. Make them work for their therapy. But have we checked the penis? No, we have not. We have not checked the penis. Maybe Dr. Daddy has, but I have not seen a penis in many, many, many years.
Size up! Size up!
Oh, look at that. Joe.
Size up!
Joey, Mr. Froggy taking out Minnesota.
Size up!
Minnesota, we had to put you through in your strength there because you were at the top.
Size up!
Good morning, Joe in black. Hello, hello, how are you?
Size up! Size up! Size up! Size up! Size up! Size up! Size up!
Oh, they're not worth it, Mr. Froggy, no?
Size up!
Wow.
Size up! Size up!
You saw one a few minutes ago in the bathroom?
Size up!
Does your own penis count? Let's ask one of the moderators. Could we set up a poll to see if it counts checking your own penis, please? Thank you.
Skybeam!
And then you all can decide amongst yourselves. Elcats, thank you very much for the kind words. We've got 25 people left in. Who is going to survive our strongest here on this battle? Alright, children, you have a poll at the top of the chat. Does looking at your own penis count? Get your votes in. Mother's poll has been posted. Mr. Froggy, thank you very much. Alright, there seems to be a divide in the poll at the moment. Things can change. Get your vote in the poll at the top of the chat. Oh, it looks like a lot of people are saying yes. If you don't think so, vote for no. What does Dr. Daddy think of what, Benty? About looking at your own penis, does it count?
First fish.
Top 10 situation.
Oh, on the note of animals and food, Chicken Roo in the win with in the lead at the moment with the most eliminations. You're frightened. Why are you frightened? Do I look scary or something? Me? Never. Six people left in for this battle. We're going to do another battle after this one before we test your speeds. We've got 29 for yes at the moment and 21 for no.
Skybeam.
Oh, well, I'm not sure Dr. Daddy has a penis anymore. So, I don't know.
Size ring.
I don't think he knows either that he doesn't have one anymore.
Size up. Size up.
We're down to 2. Just 2. All right, and the poll has been completed. Does looking at your own penis count? Yes, it does. There you go, folks. That is your information. Googs! Googs! Congratulations. Let's go again. Gem Lane, sure, come on. Come ahead. Come check. All right, children, get your balls in. Balls, balls, balls. All right, guys. Get yourselves in. Ready to battle once again. Let's see. You know who would be the perfect target just now?
Fresh fish, poor fish.
Gem, who likes the penises. Well, you will be our target this time. Everyone get ready to target a Gem Lane. Global, welcome in. How are you? 60 seconds, children. Get yourselves in. Are we sure about what? Sure about what, Blondie? Oh, you weren't quite sure if Gem Lane was a fan of the penis? Well, it's time to find out. Look at that, children. Over 200 of you working through the trials at the moment. Let's go. We do learn a lot in the therapy. Warped, welcome in, Warped. Hello. Hello, my child, welcome in. All right, everyone, target Gem Lane for penis theory. And Warped, thank you so much for the follow. Gem is trying to hold on very strong here. Oh, but Babs said no. No, Gem Lane, not today. Your ass is honoured to be chased. That's lovely. That's very nice. There's 35 of you left in. Oh, you thought Mr. Froggy was going to get it? Yes, no. Whisker Line fan, you've got to do what you got to do to make it through the trials. You fell asleep. You fell asleep. You're still looking for yours. It's a very cold day. Well, try and warm yourself up. Or maybe I could put you in the incinerator to keep you warm. Alright, and for anyone who did not hear before, after this battle royale, you're going to all be racing each other in a track. Don't be scared. You're looking for yours too, Benty. I definitely checked for penis and come up short. Well, It's not all about the size. Oh, you would like to see the dance again? Well, see, during the track, we will get some dancing again for you. What's the blue chew? What's blue chew? Today marks 20,394 days in a row that I've witnessed a penissing. Wow, lovely. Nove Deck taking that victory on the battle. Let's go to the tracks. All right, tracks. Let's see. What is the most appealing to you, Dr. Daddy? Let's see. We'll have a look. Oh, the awesome airflow. Yes, we can do that. Do not apologise. Get your balls in, folks, whilst we edit your laps that you're going to be doing here. We are going to do 8 laps here on the awesome airflow. Get your balls in. Balls. All right, children. Let's see if you can prove yourself on the tracks. 60 seconds. Get those balls in. "25 seconds, children. Do not miss out. If you miss out, then you know what's going to happen. Only 50, once again, will be making out of the trials. Are your balls fast enough? We're going to find out just now. I made my marble yeet this track once. You don't know how... Did you have hacks on, L-Cats? Did you have magic hacks? Who fell asleep a lot? Who? Honk, honk! You don't know. Oh no, not missing out on this trial. My ball is the fastest I have been told it many, many times. Well, are you sure about that? Also, Mr. Froggy, thank you for supersizing my lovely face in the chat. Very nice. Mama Qatar, thank you. Thank you very much. We did our very best in planning this today. Once again, if Mr. Froggy could put the description of who we were today for a lot of people that might not have seen or played the Outlast trials to know where I came from. But most known for the Mother Gooseberry show. Oh, no lag? No lag? Wow! Really? We may have another time for another track. Therapy was fantastic. Is it really a show? That's for you. That's for me to know and you to find out. Fantastic, yes. We will get in another dance before we are ending, by the way, folks. And there, Mr. Froggy has Santa for you. Sorry, who's Starry? I don't know who Starry is. Nope. Yes, thank you, Gemlane. It's Phyllis. You think I'm yelling? You think I'm yelling? I only know of one person yelling today, and that would be Dr. Daddy. Turtle's mummy, welcome in. Alright guys, I'm going to dance again during your next track. Dr. Daddy can shove it? Wow. Oh, Gemlane, exactly. Your mother's name is Phyllis? This segment just got very disturbing, did it? Leon with the win on this track. Let's do a different track for this one. Kugel Blitz, hello, welcome in, child. How are you? Dr. Daddy needs to get laid to drop that tittle. Remember, Dr. Daddy doesn't have a penis anymore. Don't forget. You need more than a hug after this? Wow. In a blender? Not that, Horace. Who are we waiting on? Yes, it must have squirmed a bit, yes. No problem, Mr. Froggy. You are going to protect Dr. Daddy. Gemlane, thank you very much. Dr. Daddy is just misunderstood. And it's like, you can't eat Dr. Daddy Tiny Meows. This is true, Deftil. Yes, yes, yes. You also need to up your medication, Benty. Leon takes on that track there.
Brat!
Let's grab a random track. Are you calling me a brat? Well, I guess we're doing this map then. Get yourselves in, guys.
Cocaine habit, mighty sweet. Goose you out of bed, get you on your feet. Hey, little baby.
Come and take a whiff on me.
Wiggle on down to the gooseberry patch. Get you so high, knock you on your ass. Hey, hey.
Come and take a whiff on me. Y'all know the words by now, guys.
Anybody says cocaine ain't good is a motherfucking liar and a peck of wood. Hey, hey, honey, take a whiff on me.
You want someone to sit on Dr. Daddy's face?
You gotta do right. Cocaine'll get you out.
Gooks, no problem at all. Thank you for being here. Let's hope you make it out of therapy alive. 60 seconds, children. Get yourselves on in. Alright, as I said, guys, we're going to do our famous dance during this race. Lady G, thank you ever so much for the kind words.
Me! He's gonna acknowledge me!
No, Mr. Froggy, no. from the things you've said about Dr. Daddy, I don't know if we can acknowledge you anymore. Oh, look, we've almost got 200 people in for this level of therapy, and we did. Let's go. Just no. All right, guys, are you ready? It's time to dance. Let's go, everyone. Are you ready? If you are subscribed to the channel, get those emotes in chat. Any other emotes? Let's get dancing. Let's go, guys. All right, guys, that is going to be our final dance of the day. We hope you all enjoyed our dancing. What a fantastic final dance, exactly. What the fuck's a name like Sir Prick? You must be a prick being here for 5 minutes. Wow, Dr. Daddy. Sir Prick, welcome in. How are you? Oh, shit. Are you talking to me or Dr. Daddy, Sir Prick? Laughingest, you never know where you're going to be in your level of therapy. Only 50 people making it out. Elcats, we may have time. It looks like we have time for one more battle, shall we? Let's get one more battle done before we check your leaderboard. We're going to the forest. Who is going to be our lucky... Oh, you want to be the target, Mr. Froggy? I've got you. We'll do it. Mr. Froggy, are you in? Alright, you all heard it here first. Froggy wants to be the target. Alright, children. This is your final trial before rebirth. 60 seconds, get your balls in. Balls, balls, balls. Yes, battle to the death, Ken. Correct.
Fresh fish! Poor fishy. I wish I could help, but from the size of this thing up my tuchus, I don't think we're alone.
30 seconds, children. Exclamation point play. I'll use one of those pretty pictures. Yes, get ready. Mr. Froggy wants to be your target. And after this one, we're going to find those lucky 50 making it out alive. Target Joey and the Froggy. Let's go. Run, run, run. Who got Mr. Froggy? You got killed by a spider? I heard you don't like spiders. A lot of targeting? Yes, there's lots of targets. Yes, yes. Oh, so before anyone panics, there are some adverts. That's what happens during TV shows. But once they are finished, we'll be checking your leaderboard before we head over to the Marble Legend.
Battle.
Oh, it's plural. Right, right, right. Many thanks, Mr. Froggy. Yes, that is correct. The Marble Legend is up next. By the time you will finish your final trial, we will be checking that leaderboard. And don't forget top 50 making it out alive. The rest of you? Well, that's up to you to decide where you want to go. The fun fair, the sex factory, or possibly to the jail with that crazy guy with the stick. Yes, thank you, Mr. Froggy. Good job, everyone, on your therapy today.
It's a top 10
All
situation.
right, we have some requests in chat for the sex factory. Most of you want to go there. If the stick guy knows the stick song, I want to go. I don't think he knows the stick song, but maybe you could teach it to him, Nasty Nate. Oh, Deftoll wants to go there too. See, most of you want to go there.
We have a winner.
Alrighty, Blondie. Very nice. Alright, folks, it's that time. I will read through the names. I will also post the names into the Discord for anyone who misses me reading out your name. Don't forget, the top 50 will be making it out of therapy and reborn. Let's take a look. All right, and it goes as follows. Keith Lentz, Chrissy129, Minnesota, Love Rules Us All, Jennifer14, No Space No Time, Smoke a Lot, and Babs, Deftoll. We've got Sam McQueen, we've got Kirk, Hairstone Jesus, Chicken Roo, DJ Pengo, Amara Magma, Carlos. We've got Solution, GC Inez, and Maverick, Mark Your Ballot, So Serious, Mr. Drip Tip, Zoom Devil, Christmas Freak, One Hand CJ, Hoodlum, The Mafia King, Sinead, PEI Kid, Wana, Leon, we've got Benny Poke, Play in the Chat, Badax, Shy Bree, Tundra Chick, Knitaholic, Gooks, Heather Carp Fen, White Tiger, Sly Babe, Butterfly Chica, I Am Never Growing Up, Sir Enigma, Miss Gamer, R7, Lucky Shot, Elias, Wide Ride, and Marie Anzo, your top 50 who are getting reborn and out of the trials. Everyone else, I bid you a rest in peace. I'd like to thank you all so much for coming to my show today. You fucking bastards, I can't wait to eat you all up. We are heading over to the Marble Legend.
Cocaine habit, mighty sweet.
One moment, children.
Get you on your feet, hey little baby. Come and take a whiff on me. Wiggle on down to the gooseberry patch. Get you so high, knock you on your ass. Hey, hey, sweetie, take a whiff on me.
All right, children. Happy times and happy 2 a.m. Let's go to a Marble Legend. Goodbye from me and Dr. Daddy.
Honey, take a whiff on me.
Welcome the day. Sing hey, oh, come to the fair. The children are playing so merry and gay. Hey, oh, come to the fair. All the teeth in your head are as clean as can be, shining and sharp and so pretty to see. So breathe in the happy gas, little ones all, and you fly away on a goose wing. And laugh till your reason just fritters away with a hey-ho, come to the fair. The geeses are honking the song that you know. Hey-ho, come to the fair. The wings are all beating away, let's go.